This week's Quick Tip Tuesday is going to get you editing your photos faster in Lightroom. If you're like me, where you're editing 25 to 50 images at a time, or maybe more, maybe sometimes 100 or 150, or maybe you're crazy enough to still edit your own wedding images, today's quick tip should help speed things up a little bit. And when you're talking of a lot of images, a little faster on each image adds up to a lot of time later. So today's tip is going to make you faster in Lightroom and then faster again. It's kind of two tips. And if you guys like these Quick Tip Tuesdays, hit the like button below and make sure to subscribe for a Quick Tip Tuesday every Tuesday. It's right there in the name. Some people were confused on what day to come here for the quick tip, so now Tuesday's right there in the name. Okay, today's quick tip focuses on getting your exposure correct faster. So your exposure, your shadow, your highlights, your whites, your blacks, get those all dialed in faster. Because when I mentioned that I always travel with a mouse to edit my photos on the road because I don't like using the trackpad, somebody else commented how much they hate using the trackpad to try to click each slider in Lightroom to drag it around and then click the next one and drag it and then move up and drag. And I realized that person, they don't know this very simple tip. So for that commenter, who I totally won't point out right now, this tip is for you. And for everybody else, I hope this helps you as well. All right, let's jump into Lightroom. I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, here in Lightroom, I have 19 images from our Oregon trip, vlogs coming soon, that we're gonna go through and we're gonna edit. I'm gonna show you from start to finish how I would edit these 19 images. So click on the first image here and we're gonna switch over to our develop module. And here in our develop module, the first thing I'm gonna do is put a preset on the entire set of images. I have some presets that I've created that I really like, and for this, I'm gonna use my everyday warm preset. And basically what my everyday warm preset does is obviously it warms things up a little bit, but it also kind of pulls up some of those shadows, brings down those whites and those highlights, and flattens things out a little bit more, giving a little bit more range, more of a natural look to it than kind of that contrasty image that comes straight out of camera. And then I'm gonna go ahead and select all these images here at the bottom and hit sync, and I'm gonna do everything but white balance, local, adjustments, transform, spot removal, and crop. But everything else, I'm gonna let copy and sync all the way across to make sure that that preset is now on all of my images. And we just hit synchronize. And now I can go through any of these images and I can see that my preset has been applied. So if I look at my before, that's before and that's after the preset. Before and after. And like any preset, a preset really is just giving you a style, but then you still need to go in and adjust all your exposure controls and your white balance to make the image look perfect. Okay, now what the commenter was talking about was basically going in here and grabbing each of these exposure control handles, grab them right exactly by the handle and adjusting them. So going to the exposure slider, grabbing that little tiny handle, sliding it down or sliding it up, then grabbing the contrast and then the highlights, and each of those sliders, grab them by the handle. So here's where today's quick tip, which is kind of two tips, comes in. Because if you're going in here and you're finding this exact handle and you're clicking and dragging and then going back down to this one and clicking and dragging, what you're really doing is you're looking at your controls more than you're looking at your image. So what we're gonna do instead of clicking is we are just gonna hover our cursor over any one of these control sliders, and then we're gonna use the up and down arrow keys on our keyboard to adjust the value. So if I hover my cursor over exposure, again, I'm not clicking, I'm just hovering. If I hit my up arrow key, the exposure goes up. And if I hit my down arrow key, it goes down. And then I can just move my cursor down to contrast, add some contrast like that, go down here to highlights, hit plus to boost the highlights, here for shadows, hit plus to boost those. We'll bring whites down, we'll boost the blacks a bit, bring exposure back down a little bit. And again, all I'm doing is hovering the cursor over each of those sliders and then using the up and down arrow keys to adjust them. So I can kind of be less precise because I don't have to grab each of those handles individually. I can just be anywhere over the slider or anywhere over these number values. So if I'm hovering over here, I can still move my highlights up and down. If I'm hovering over the slider itself, I can move my highlights up and down. And this works for white balance and your tint as well. So I can move up here for the temperature, I can move my temperature up, I can move my temperature, my tint down. For any of the control sliders, all I have to do is hover my cursor and then use the up down arrow keys on my keyboard. And then of course, since my hand is kind of right over that up down left right key area, then to get to the next image, I just hit right and then just do the same thing. Now it's bring this exposure down, bring the shadows down a little bit, bring those blacks down. And again, my preset has gotten me close. It's gotten the sliders generally where I want them. I'm just nudging them at that last 10% to make it perfect and exactly how I like it. Bring a little more, let's add a little more temperature to that, and right there, looks good. So here's our before, here's our after. I like it. But there's one other way to adjust all these controls that I think is even better. Because the weird thing over here with these sliders is they're in a really weird order. They go exposure, then contrast, then highlights, then back down to shadows, then up to whites, then back down to blacks. And that's a weird order for them to be in. But if I go up here to my histogram, I can actually do the exact same thing. If I go up here, right here is my blacks. If I move over to the right, it becomes my shadows. Move further right, it's my exposure. Keep going to the right, highlights and whites. And we're gonna do the same thing, but hover over our histogram. So let's go to the next image by clicking right. And now just by hovering up here, I'm gonna use my up and down arrow keys to bring my exposure down, drop the shadows a little bit, really drop those blacks, bring the shadows back up. Let's bring those highlights and whites down a little bit, add some warmth here, and done with that image. For me, using that histogram is a better visual representation. I can really see what's going on as I'm moving things. And again, like I said, it moves from blacks on one end all the way up to whites on the other end, and they're in order. Makes way more sense. I don't know why the control sliders below are not in the same order as the histogram. It feels to me like that would make more sense, but I don't make Lightroom. Adobe, it would be sweet if we could change the order of the sliders on the right to make things more customizable. I would appreciate that. But until that day comes, this for me is the fastest way to move through images. I go up on the histogram here, I click to the right, I add some temperature because I knew that last one was. Let's bring down the exposure, down the blacks, up, bum, 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 bum. I like that image. Done. And let's just go ahead and work through some of these images here, and I can show you how quickly you can move through a set of images just by using this histogram. And that is a super fast way to move through images. I can grab all those different controls and just up, down, right, up, down, right, up, down, right. And like I said, this technique over having to grab each individual handle might save you 5 to 10 seconds per image. But if you're editing many images, that's many minutes that you could be saving just by using the histogram to adjust your levels as opposed to grabbing each slider by the handle, moving it around, and then, If any of you are still doing that, switch to this quick tip immediately. And guys, that is it for this week's Quick Tip Tuesday, because they're on Tuesday. Quick Tip Tuesday on Tuesday. Come on back here next Tuesday for another Quick Tip Tuesday. Did you guys think there wasn't gonna be a quick tip today because of the whole Polar Pro phone case video? Because you'd be wrong. Quick Tip Tuesday. They're on Tuesdays. So even if another video drops on Tuesday, the quick tip will still be on Tuesday. Oh, and if you want to see more of these images, go over to my Instagram because a bunch of these images are going to be dropping on my Instagram over this next week. Boom! Another Quick Tip Tuesday done. Gotta think of something for next week.